Part 30. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 291. Chapter 291, he saw through it early in the morning. Su Jianran looked at Su Changyang subconsciously. She still hadn't figured out where Si Yao was. The current movement made her suspicious. Going over and knocking on the door, she was not sure who was inside, but she had an intuition that made her want to find out. "Is anyone here?" she asked. There is no answer in it. Knocked on the door again, but there was no response from inside. There was such a loud movement just now, and suddenly it was like deathly silence. Ask someone from the housekeeping department to check if anything happened to the guests. Su Changyang turned around and said. Just as he was about to call someone, the door was opened from the inside, and standing at the door was Yun Chugzyo. Her hair was spread out, and she looked like she was not awake. She poked her head out of the crack in the door with half-open eyes. "Who is it?" "Chu Shui." Su Jianran was surprised. He didn't expect that she would be inside. "The key is here." "Ziran, why, there are so many people?" "Yawn." He covered his lips with one hand and yawned. "Didn't you go to rest?" "Why, there are so many people." "Yes, I went to rest. My brother came to take me home," she replied, staring at her unblinkingly, then looking past her and looking into the room through the gap. "Chugzyo, Si Yao." Su Jianran felt uneasy and always felt that something was wrong, but he couldn't figure it out for the moment and couldn't explain it. "Your brother, are you bringing so many people to take you home?" She grabbed a handful of hair, then, I will continue to sleep for a while." As he said that, he was about to close the door. Su Jianran pressed against the door panel to prevent her from closing it, and smiled at her. "Chu Shui, the sound in your room was so loud just now. Did something fall? Are you okay?" With that said, she wanted to go in, but Yun Chugzyo didn't stop her. "It's okay. I just fell out of bed due to a heavy sleep. There was such a loud noise, did you all hear it?" So careless, he said this, but Su Jianran quickly walked in, and the paparazzi outside also wanted to follow in, but Yun Chugzyo reached out to stop him. "Come in, don't you, isn't it suitable?" Wandered around the room, Su Jianran found nothing. She was the only one in the room that was empty, as if the noise just now had never happened at all. Fell off the bed? Looking at the bed, it was indeed quite messy, and there was no sign of anyone else. Was she worried? "But, there's so much wrong with it. When I passed the bathroom, I looked inside and saw that it was empty. Is there really no one there?" "What are you looking for?" Yun Chugzyo suddenly leaned over her shoulder and asked softly. It was so sudden that Su Jianran was startled and shook his head quickly. "No, it's nothing." "Then, Chugzyo, you should be careful to close the door when you are here alone, and have a good rest." She retreated. The people outside saw that there was no news here, and they were immediately disappointed, but they could only disperse. Su Jianran didn't say anything along the way. Su Changyang didn't want to pay attention to her at first, but when he saw her frowning in thought, he couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking about?" "It's nothing." She shook her head, puzzled by Yun Chugzyo's appearance in the opposite room. "Brother, Si Yao. How dare you mention it?" Su Changyang pointed his finger at her and almost jumped. "Don't blame me for not reminding you, this matter is not over yet, you can take care of yourself." She pursed her lips, shrank her shoulders and stopped talking. Yes, it would be fine if she succeeded, but since Si Yao already knew what she was going to do, why didn't he make it clear to her directly? Also, I was obviously watching the glass of wine he drank. "Close the door." Yun Chugzyo clapped her hands gently, turned around, opened the bathroom door, and opened the shower curtain. In the bathtub, a man was naked from the waist up and wearing only a pair of underwear. He was lying in the bathtub in a weird posture, with his head tilted to one side. He was obviously passed out. She glanced coldly, turned around and faced the sink, washed her hands carefully, and looked at herself in the mirror. Her soft hair was a little messy, and one side of her cheeks was slightly red. She was unprepared and was hurt by this man. Her fingers gently touched the red spot on her cheek. She slowly knelt down in front of the bathtub, raised her hand, and slapped the man's face hard twice. This slap was very powerful, and immediately after the slap, the cheeks became visibly swollen. The man snorted softly, but he was still asleep, as if he didn't notice at all. After the beating, she was probably satisfied. She stood up again, walked out of the bathroom, picked up her coat and put it on, arranging it slowly. Su Jianran was picked up by Su Changyang, which meant that Si Yao was not in her room either. However, she had clearly arranged everything. Originally, the Zhaochenggan was supposed to go to 1808 opposite, and he was resting in this room. It was Si Yao who was drugged. Now, Su Jianran was picked up by her brother unharmed, and she was almost raped by Zhaochenggan. What went wrong in the middle? All she could think of was the man who had disappeared. In other words, he has seen through it early on? Is that man simpler than she imagined? When she walked out of the room, she turned off the light, and the cold moonlight shone lightly on her profile, making her whole person look a little gloomy. Yun Chugzio took out her mobile phone and said, "Let someone clean up 1806. The next day, the Entertainment Gossip Weekly was full of obscure gossip as usual, with only one piece of news. Zhao Chenggan, a well-known in Sioux City and the second young master of the Zhao group, offended someone unknown. He was stripped naked and thrown on the street. He was also suspected of being beaten. Originally, this kind of thing could be reported to the police, but because of his reputation, he was usually quite hated by others. In addition, he spent all day doing nothing but drinking and drinking, so the people in the Zhao family didn't take this incompetent descendant seriously. Just let it go. No one knew, and a breaking news story was almost ignited. By this time, Si Yao had already boarded the plane to the imperial capital and was not interested in these final matters at all. General Secretary After Su Feng received the news from the ground, he turned to report. Yeah, he responded and leaned there quietly, closing his eyes and concentrating. Your words have been received. Su Changyang said that he will send Miss Su abroad and will not let her appear in the sight of you and your wife again. Su Changyang gritted his teeth and promised. He could hear this, but it actually gave him a lot of face. If it weren't for the old friendship in the past, the thing Su Jianran did would be enough to kill her. 10,000 times is not enough. Su Feng was very moved. How could Miss Su, who usually looked delicate and frail, be so bold and dare to drug Mr. Si? End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 292. Chapter 292 Su Jianran, give up. Although Su Jianran was not physically punished, this punishment was harsher than any other corporal punishment. Mom. She cried and made trouble, but her parents' attitude clearly told her that there was no room for negotiation on this matter. Of course. After sighing, Su wanted to say something, but turned to look at her son's face, and held back. She could only turn her head away and shed tears. Su Changyang changed his previous irregularity and said sternly, "At this time, it's useless for you to call anyone. When you were brave enough to provoke him, why didn't you expect that it would happen now? My mother, don't help her either, just it's because I spoiled her so much that if we don't send her out of the country, our Su family's business will be ruined." Su's face was not very pretty, and she said cautiously, "No, it can't be possible. After all, our two families are family friends, and I have watched Si Yao grow up," but she was just confused for a moment. "He has liked Si Yao since he was a child. It's not like he doesn't know it. Besides, he didn't make any big mistakes. Even if he did, we would still suffer a loss. How could we? Mom, he called out loudly, and Su Changyang had a headache. It was because of such a mother that he had spoiled his sister to be like this, without considering the consequences of doing things. What are you talking about? Now it's Su Zhenran who has how bad is the nature of someone else's drugging, and how bad the reputation is. Do you know what would have happened if she hadn't been thinking about the friendship between the two families and had inserted another messy man into the room? Sample. As soon as he yelled these words, mother and daughter both shuddered. Especially Su Yuruan, she only felt that her plan had failed, and she was a little unwilling to do so, but she didn't think much about it at all. Now being yelled at by Su Changjiang's voice, it feels like his head has been hit hard by a sledgehammer. Yes, if Su Changyang was not in the room at that time, but some other messy man, the result would be. She felt a chill running down her back, and she was really scared when she thought about it. Yuran, you should think about it. He has let you go twice before. If there is a third time, let alone you, our entire Su family, me, my parents, everyone will get in, do you understand? Su Zhenran said nothing, but his pale face said everything. This is your last chance. If you go abroad, it's best not to come back. Anyway, my parents and I can visit you in the future. You have also quit the entertainment industry, so just saying that you are going abroad to study has already saved you enough face. Looking at her look, Su Changjiang's voice softened, a little bit unbearable. After all, she was his own girl, and he was also very sad. Su Zhenran was silent for a while, then, can I see him again before I leave? No, she refused decisively. Before she could speak, Su Changyang continued, do you think he will still be willing to see you after what you did this time? Besides, he is not in Su City now. And let me remind you, he should have blocked all your contact information. He will never want to see you again. Don't you understand? Haran, give up. These last few words were simply fatal. Su Zhenran could hardly stand and swayed. Seeing her collapsed and desperate look, Mrsu was very sad and quickly hugged her daughter. Changyang, don't talk anymore. However, if you don't contact. There are many good men in this world. If he doesn't choose you, it's his loss. It's not worth being sad for such a person, do you understand? Biting her lower lip, Su Zhenran opened her eyes wide, but she couldn't hold back a single tear. He didn't say anything as he was held by his mother. After a while, he took a deep breath and said, then, I want to see someone again before I leave. Who do you want to see? Su Changyang asked, frowning. The car slowly drove into the yard and parked. Before entering the house, I heard soft conversations coming from the living room. The voices seemed happy and occasionally chuckled. Stunned for a moment, Yoon Chugzio walked in and saw her mother sitting on a chair in the back, with someone sitting next to her. Su Zhenran? After a slight hesitation, she changed her shoes and walked over with a smile on her face. Mom, I'm back. Zhenran is here too. The demeanor is friendly and natural, there is nothing different about him. Yao Ying smiled and nodded. Yuran has been here for a while, and he chatted with me for a while. He is such a good boy. Look at you, you don't know what you are busy with all day long, and you don't have time to chat with your mother. There have been a lot of things in the company recently, and you know that my uncle is a bit busy, so I can help out a little bit more. She gestured with her fingers and said naughtily. You are the most capable, Yao Ying said angrily, and stood up. Then you and Zhenran chat for a while, and I'll go get someone to stew some sweet soup for you to drink. Thank you, Mom. He bent down and touched her cheek lightly. Yoon Chugzio sat down next to her and looked at Su Zhenran with a smile. How come you are free today and didn't call me in advance? A phone call. Su Genran took a sip from the teacup beside him and said with a chuckle, "If I had called you in advance, would you still welcome me?" With his eyes slightly focused, Yoon Chugzyo said with a smile, "What are you talking about? Of course I welcome it. I hope you come here every day." "Really?" Su Genran slowly put down the cup and raised his eyes to look at her. "It's a pity that I'm afraid I'll never be able to come again." "Huh, why?" Yoon Chugzyo looked surprised, with surprise and disbelief written all over her face, as if she really knew nothing. Looking at her appearance, Su Genran suddenly felt that what Su Changyang said was right. He was really stupid for not realizing before that his friend was not as innocent as he appeared. "You really don't know," she tilted her head and gently rubbed her fingers on the armrests of the chair. "I will be leaving the country in 2 days, and I may not come back." "Not coming back? Why? Where are you going? Why are you so sudden?" A series of questions blurted out, and Yoon Chugzyo seemed to be really nervous about her situation. Laughing rather sarcastically, Su Genran said, "Shouldn't you ask me if I succeeded that day, what was the final result, and is there any good news?" The anxiety on her face faded slightly, and she said with a look of regret, "I was just about to say this. What happened that day? Why were you with your brother? Was he discovered by him, so it didn't work? But don't be too discouraged, there is always a chance." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 293. Chapter 293. Not anymore from today on. "Chu Shui, why were you there that day?" Su Genran asked calmly. "Oh, that day, I drank too much and was a little tired, so I went to take a rest. Besides, I also wanted to give you a warning, but I didn't expect, I just fell asleep." She scratched her hair as she spoke. "I'm sorry. By the way, what happened that day?" Su Genran didn't speak, but just stared at her, as if his eyes were trying to read something from her face. But even when she was staring at her like this, Yoon Chugzyo didn't show any discomfort at all. She looked calm and even blinked innocently, looking puzzled. "Originally, I wanted to ask you why the paparazzi came at 9:30 when we were notified at 10 o'clock, but now, I don't think I need to ask any more." After a while, Su Yinran said calmly. "Huh? Why?" Yoon Chugzyo opened her eyes wide. "Did they come at 9:30? How come it's so fast?" "Yes, why are you so fast?" Su Genran lowered his head and said with a slight smile, "Maybe it's God's will. Or maybe it's a punishment for my unclear understanding of people." "Yuran, what's wrong with you?" He held her hand and asked worriedly. Looking down at his hand, he took it out silently. Su Genran shook his head. "It's nothing, Chugzyo, I didn't realize until today that you are very powerful, really. Much more powerful than the Yoon Chugzyo I know." "What's so great? What is the Yoon Chugzyo you know?" "Kiran, why can't I understand what you said today?" Yoon Chugzyo's eyes are big and watery. She looks at you with wide eyes. "Sometimes, it makes people feel like an innocent little beast." She blinked, innocently and uncomprehendingly, her eyes full of confusion. With a faint sigh, Su Genran said, "Whether you understand it or not, I already have the answer I want. I'm leaving here anyway, and I have no value to you anymore. Take care of yourself. He let me go once, and I'll let you go once. But it's hard to say whether he will let you go." After saying that, she stood up. "You ran." Holding her wrist, Yoon Chugzyo raised her head and looked at her. "What on earth are you talking about? Why should you let it go? What's wrong with you? I'm so worried when you're like this." "That's enough, Yoon Chugzyo." She couldn't bear it anymore and threw her away hard. Su Genran was very angry. Now that we've said it, what's the point of pretending anymore? Don't think you're smart, you know how to scheme. Let me tell you, what I'm saying is he knows everything we do, including you. He has seen through it. We are not his opponents at all, and neither are you. Ran, why do you need to say such things? Aren't we friends? Yoon Chug-seo also stood up, her attitude still very sincere. Friends, Soo Jin-ran sneered twice and said, from today on, no more. She strode outside. Maybe she heard the quarrel. Yao Ying walked out and happened to see her walking out. Jin-ran, why did you just leave? Why don't you sit down for a while? Jin-ran. Soo Jin-ran nodded briefly and left without looking back. Unable to stop her, Yao Ying turned to look at her daughter, with a hesitant look on her face. What's wrong with you? It's nothing, maybe she's in a bad mood. Shrugging, Yoon Chug-seo walked over with a smile. Mom, didn't you say you cook sweet soup? You are so greedy, you are not afraid of gaining weight. He said this, but he still waved and asked the servant to bring the prepared desserts. Speaking of which, last time you said you already have a partner, after all who is it? I never saw you bring it back. It's divided, he replied nonchalantly. Yao Ying was startled. Divided? Why did we divide them properly? Didn't you say you wanted to bring them back? Oh, it's not normal for us young people to fall in love. If we get along, we'll break up. If we don't get along, we'll break up. That's not normal. She waved her hand and said disapprovingly, Mom, don't worry about it. I will definitely find the best one for you. My son-in-law is back. Looking at her indifferent expression, Yao Ying sighed, how can you not worry? Your father is going to marry that woman tomorrow. I didn't say anything else, which was very distressing to think about. Yoon Chug-seo stopped eating for a moment, then turned to look at her mother. Does he really want to accept that woman in? Can uncle agree? What does he think of his family? Your father is determined now, and no one's words can influence his decision. When she mentioned this, her face, which had always been decisive, also showed a sad look. In the end, it's because I didn't give birth to a son. So what if I don't have a son? Yoon Chug-seo suddenly became angry. My uncle's family has a son, can he inherit the family business? I have done so many things in the company over the years, how can I be inferior to my son? How is that scoundrel outside my father better than me? I. Shwe'er. He called her name softly, and Yao Ying looked at her in surprise, probably because he had never seen her like this before. This call brought her back to her senses and she cleared her throat. I mean, it's not your fault. If it's your fault, it's Dad. He's the one who's sorry for you. Looking at her deeply, Yao Ying stretched out her hand to pull her into her arms, gently stroking her hair with one hand. Mom knows that you are very capable and sensible. She blames me for not giving you a boy. Everything in the Yoon family belongs to you. Mom, why can't women? Is it because I am a woman that everything in the Yoon family must be the offspring of that woman outside? Why? Slowly raising her head, Yoon Chug-seo's eyes sparkled. The light emitted was something she had never seen before. Yao Ying was very frightened, but at the same time she was shaken by what she said. You are right, but your father. Mom, what do you think my father would have done if he hadn't had that bastard? She asked suddenly. Shwe'er, what are you going to do? I don't know why, but a chill suddenly rose up. Looking at her daughter, she didn't even recognize her. Nothing, I'm just asking. What can I do? I'm just a girl. Sticking out her tongue at her mother, she let go of her hand and turned around to continue eating. Yao Ying looked at her eating leisurely, as if it was no different from usual, but she was eating, and suddenly stopped and said thoughtfully, I read a book that day, saying that in this world people die in accidents every day, and the proportion of those who die in accidents is very high. Do you think that this woman and that scoundrel will also die in this proportion? End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 294. Chapter 294. This is the first test. Before Yao Ying could say anything, she suddenly smiled and said, "Hey, I just hope so. It would be great if this really happens, don't you think so, Mom?" Looking at her, Yao Ying was silent for a while and said, "Yes." She had something in mind, but no matter how she tried, she never thought of getting to this point. She still doesn't have the guts to kill people, but Schwer suddenly mentioned it like this. Is it really unintentional, or? I looked at her again worriedly and saw her lowering her head and continuing to eat the sweet soup with an innocent look on her face, so I felt that I was thinking too much. The imperial capital. Although the Fragrance Industry Association is not very out of the industry, at least in the industry, it is still very authoritative. Those who can hold positions in this industry association have at least several awards in their hands, and of course they are not too young. So Su-Yun was very surprised when she received the invitation letter. After all, she was still relatively young in this industry and her qualifications were relatively low. Since you are here, you should be at peace with yourself and just come here to learn from the experience. It's just that she didn't expect that after arriving in the imperial capital, as soon as she got off the plane, someone claiming to be from an industry association drove a special car to pick her up. She originally thought she would check into a hotel, but she didn't expect it to be an independent small courtyard. As far as the size of the small courtyard is concerned, it is not very big, but in a place like the imperial capital where land is at a premium, having such a courtyard is much more valuable than any high-rise building. Are industry associations so generous? She had never heard of it before. The small courtyard is not very big, but there are many flowers and plants planted in the courtyard. It can be seen that the person who takes care of it is still very caring. However, the strange thing is that she is the only one living here. Could it be said that the other people attending the meeting have not come? Or does everyone have such an independent yard to live in? That would be really rich. Miss Su, please rest first and we won't disturb you. After putting her luggage away, the person who came to pick her up was ready to leave. Wait a minute, after calling someone, she had to ask clearly, am I the only one who lives here? Or are there other people? Also, how far is the clubhouse from here? How can I contact you here? Here, there is a box on the table in the room. You will know it when you look at it. After saying this, they all left and left. Su-Yun vaguely felt that this trip was a bit strange, but since she was already here, she decided to find out more about this strangeness. Turning around and entering the house, I saw a wooden box on the table. I touched it lightly with my fingers and intuitively felt that there should be no mechanism. I buckled the hidden button and opened it with a slight press. Inside were several transparent vials and a bottle. Letter. Su-Yun opened the envelope, and there was a paragraph written on the letter paper inside, which was addressed to her. Dear Miss Su, hello. You will definitely wonder why you are placed here instead of a hotel. We perfumers should not hang out in dirty places like hotels. Although this courtyard is not big, there are dozens of natural spices, as I believe you have guessed. Yes, this is your first test. Please create at least 2 perfumes with different flavors within a week. Of course, it can't be the common popular model on the market. As for the equipment and instruments you need, you can find them all in this house. If you do not meet the requirements, we will not meet, and you will not have the opportunity to join the Fragrance Industry Association. If you pass, I will receive you personally. Of course, you can also refuse and leave now. Then you will lose the qualification to join the association for life, and it seems like the writing is unfinished, with a series of ellipses to give people room for imagination. I don't know if it's because he's trying to get something, or for some other reason. Handwriting can't tell anything, but he played a detective game for her first. Is it an assessment? Soo-yoon smiled, let go, and put down the letter, then picked up the small bottles and looked at them. They were just ordinary perfume bottles. The letter said there were at least 2 types, but 6 bottles were prepared. The other party seemed to be sure that she would accept this kind of assessment, but she didn't know whether everyone who had accepted invitations from industry associations before had to go through such a test. Since she was given a week, she might as well take a walk around the yard first and get familiar with the environment. There are flowers and plants in the front yard. It is indeed as mentioned in the letter. There are dozens of kinds of spices, but they are all common and commonly used. In the backyard, there is a laboratory-like house, which is not big. But the equipment is all there, but it is not complete and some are missing. It can be said that this yard looks unusual, but it is indeed very ordinary, because from the raw materials to the instruments, they are all ordinary and cannot be more ordinary. If you only rely on these few things, you are required to make something that is unparalleled on the market. Commonly seen perfumes are a bit overwhelming. We are all perfumers, so it's impossible that we don't know the difficulty involved. So, this is deliberately difficult. Is this the so-called assessment? She planned to go out for a walk to see what this was like. However, when she was about to go out, she discovered that the door was locked. In other words, it was locked from the outside and she couldn't get out at all. She took out her mobile phone to make a call, but there was no signal. When she came here, she looked and saw that this was not a remote area. It was impossible for there to be no signal in the city. The only explanation was that there was a shielding jammer or something like that installed nearby. Is such painstaking efforts really just to test her? She was somewhat curious about the person who wrote this letter. Mr. Still no news. The voice was cold, and just hearing it sent shivers down your spine. Su Feng shook his head. It's impossible to trace, but Madam has indeed arrived in the imperial capital, that's for sure. It's just. Speak, there was a cold voice, revealing his impatience, and you could hear that his patience had reached its extreme. Yes, hanging his head, Su Feng was actually surprised by the news, but he still told the truth honestly. The Fragrance Industry Association said that no such invitation letter has been sent, and they have not invited anyone. Madam. So it is completely fake. I don't know who sent it. If this is really the case, the consequences are hard to predict. I don't dare to think who is so bold as to send out an invitation letter in the name of an industry association. The most important thing is that they did not find out that it was a fake. Yes, I have rested for too long, haven't I? He slowly raised his eyelids and looked at Su Feng. The sharpness in his eyes was like a sharp blade. Su Feng had seen that look before. It meant 2 words. Fear. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 295. Chapter 295 Fighting Incense. Sanli Alley in the imperial capital at night is famous for its liveliness and bustling. Most of the people here are all kinds of people. Of course, it is also filled with all kinds of people. But not many people know that about 1 kilometer away from Sanli Alley, there is a secluded small street with some bars in it, but it is not a lively bar, but other niche groups. Here, you can find small shops that are unique to your own interests and hobbies, and you may also find some like-minded people. However, because it is a relatively small crowd and the environment is relatively quiet, there are not many people. Only a few signboard lights are on, indicating that it is still open for business. A slender figure came to the door of a store and looked up at the sign on the left, Dark Night Fragrance. This is it? She had learned about this Dark Night Fragrance before she came. Others may not be familiar with this store, but in the circle of perfumers, it is an interesting place because it brings together all kinds of people who love perfume, or are interested in spices. People doing research, it's just that this place is only open at night. Furthermore, I heard that there are some unique and exclusive spices here that are not sold outside. The boss is also quite willful and will sell it or not. Depending on his mood, even a top perfumer may not give him face. She didn't find out who the boss was, but it was worth it to come and see this mysterious place. As soon as I stepped through the door, a faint fragrance floated into my nose. It was very light, and the taste was very pure. It was like Uten blooming alone in the dark night. Unknowingly, it was beautiful all by itself. The light in the store is not very bright, and classical style music is slowly flowing. There are several seats scattered inside, and people are already gathering in a small area, chatting in low voices. The overall environment and atmosphere are good. Only, I don't see the characteristics that are unique to perfume lovers. Is this your first time here, girl? A waiter came forward to greet her. He was wearing a simple gown and looked a bit like a waiter in an ancient shop. Soo-yoon responded lightly, thinking that they would probably look at their faces to see if they were familiar customers. Want something to drink? Soo-yoon looked around and said casually, orange juice. She had promised Si-Yao not to drink casually. This kind of clear drink would be enough to drink some juice. Sorry, no. Unexpectedly, the other party answered her like this. Soo-yoon was stunned for a moment, then looked at him. What about mango juice? Coconut juice? Milk? After seeing him shaking his head, he couldn't help but be curious. Then what do you have here? There is water, the waiter replied with a slight smile. Only water? Pure water, mineral water, boiled water, hot water, ice water, room temperature water. I said several words in succession, and they were all water. Soo-yoon was convinced. This is the first time I know that there are so many categories for water alone. I couldn't help but laugh. Is there any difference? Of course, although they are all water, the ingredients, impurities, and purity are different. Even if they are both water, the taste is different. Let alone saying it, it sounds like a myth, but if you think about it carefully, it seems to actually make some sense. Soo-yoon laughed and said, then give me a drink. She also tasted it to see what the difference was. Okay, she agreed quickly. The waiter turned around, and she found a seat near the bar to sit down. The whole store was quite quiet, so a noise in the corner was quite noticeable. If you lose, you lose. You will definitely lose this time. Don't say it too early, it's not necessarily the case. We have already tasted Lao Liu's. I don't believe that yours is better than his. Soo-yoon looked over subconsciously, and the waiter from before brought a few glasses of water and placed them one by one in front of her. She asked, what are they doing? If it were in an ordinary bar, it might be a drinking contest, but here, it doesn't sound like it. Glancing in the direction she was talking about, the waiter smiled and said, it's your first time here and you may not know much about it, but you must be a perfumer too. How come you don't know about Duxiang? Duxiang, when Soo-yoon heard this term, her first reaction was, isn't that a special kind of Buddhist incense? You're talking about the name of the spices, I'm talking about a way to play it, it's different. He waved his hand. There were probably no customers at the moment. He took a rag and wiped the bar table, chatting while wiping it. Oh, just for fun. Seeing that she didn't understand at all, the waiter became interested and patiently explained to her, it's just that some guests will make an appointment to gather here, and those who have made an appointment to fight will prepare themselves to participate in the fight during this period. The spices are then notarized by several notaries to see whose spices are the most special, most distinctive, as well as long-lasting and fragrant. Wait, there is a lot of knowledge involved. Waving his hand, she might not understand what he meant. Anyway, it's just a small competition, hey, let's have fun. In other professions, there are cockfights and cricket fights, as well as wine and poetry fights. Here, we fight for incense. After saying this, he saw someone coming again, so he went out to greet the guests. Although he only introduced a few sentences, it also greatly aroused Su-yun's interest. Tuxiang. She had never heard of it in Sioux City before, nor had she seen it abroad. There are competitions and other large and small events, but this is the first time I have seen such a private event purely for fun. While sipping the cups of different waters unhurriedly, she never moved her eyes away from the table. She was very curious about what the spices they brought with them were. You must know that even as a top perfumer, it is impossible to guarantee that you are familiar with all spices. The world is so big, and the natural resources are so abundant. However, the levels of fragrance are ever changing, and there are countless types of spices. It is this endless exploration that brings her great pleasure. And often many unseen special spices are discovered in some inadvertent places. For example, she planned to refine and layer the original fragrance of the wood she got from Yunchuao to make a new type of essential oil. However, because the material was relatively rare, and Yunchuao said that there was only so much, and then there was no more, so she didn't take action for a long time, cherishing the treasure. Just say that you have lost and still don't admit it. What are you bringing? It has no taste at all. That's why I didn't smell anything. I thought there was something wrong with my nose. Admit defeat, but it's too embarrassing for you to lose this time. I heard those people saying in unison. Su-yun turned her head and saw that the person who was being squeezed was a girl. She probably couldn't bear the shame of being squeezed, and her fair face turned red. You guys don't understand at all. Digression, the game Project Fragrance Fighting was compiled by the author himself, so don't go into details. Also, if the heroine wasn't imprisoned, why would she be here? Take a guess. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 296. Chapter 296. I want them all. Out of curiosity, she got up and left the bar, moving closer in that direction. It was only after getting closer that I could see clearly that the thing placed in the middle was actually a piece of grass, at least it looked like an ordinary grass. You don't understand at all. If you don't believe me, why don't you take a closer look? The girl looked unyielding, as if she felt she was holding some kind of unparalleled treasure. This appearance even attracted sneers from those around him. Forget it, it smells like ordinary grass, at most it smells like grass. Why, is it possible that you can still smell the smell of chicken legs? Ha 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 ha. One sentence caused a lot of laughter, and someone even patted her shoulder. Forget it, there's no shame in admitting defeat. But if you take this, it's really a bit. Probably because she felt it was boring, the winner was decided, so they dispersed, and no one paid attention to her grass anymore. Everyone dispersed, but Su-yun thought it was a good time. Looking at the girl who lowered her head and bit her lip, she walked up to her and sat down opposite her. You, raising her head, the girl looked at her in confusion. Sorry, I overheard your game. Su-yun shrugged, leaning forward. You, can I take a look? Su-yun stared at her hesitantly, her eyes full of vigilance. Su-yun didn't care about her eyes or guarding. She was more interested in the thing itself. You must know that in nature, everything has its own unique flavor. Every plant and tree can be used as raw materials for spices, but some are common, some are special, some are easy to extract, and some are more difficult. This girl is so stubborn and insists that this is spices and is better than her opponents. Maybe there is something special about it? First he came closer and sniffed gently. The smell is very light, just the ordinary grass aroma, and maybe because it has been left in the soil for too long, it has lost its fresh taste and looks so decadent. Thinking about it for a moment, she reached out to touch it. Hey, probably afraid of damaging her treasure, the girl wanted to stop her, but she was a step faster and had already picked it up. Looking at it carefully, I pinched it with the tip of my fingernail. There was a little bit of juice, but the taste was completely different from before. If it was just a very light smell of grass just now, it couldn't be more ordinary, but at this moment, a very unique aroma is emitted, like grass and flowers, but the smell is very, very light. If you don't pay attention carefully, can't smell it. She had already pinched it, and she was so close that she could smell it. It was not surprising that those people just now were ignorant. However, it doesn't matter whether others recognize the product or not, she likes this thing. Where did you find this? Suyun asked, looking up at her. What are you doing? Although she acted very friendly, she was a stranger after all, so the girl still did not let down her guard. Nothing, I think it's pretty good, so I wanted to ask. Her eyes shone with surprise, as if someone finally recognized the goods, but her reaction in the next second was to immediately the thing back from Suyun's hand, with the baby in front of her. You think it's good? Well, although the taste is very light, the fragrance should be long-lasting, and this taste is quite special. If it is refined, the fragrance should be even better than it is now. Nodding, Suyun expressed her thoughts. Are you a perfumer? The girl asked, feeling like an expert upon hearing her words. Right, nodding slightly, her attention was still on the thing itself. Then you can tell me where this spice was found, or, can I buy it? Maybe it's possible that others want to make a profit out of this, after all, girls still value it. Not for sale. Unexpectedly, she refused directly, and before Suyun could say anything, she stood up and walked straight to her friends who had dispersed in twos and threes. You ignorant people, look, all the perfumers know that this is good stuff. She spoke with a proud expression, like a child who had been praised. Suyun was startled. She didn't expect that she would directly reject him and then show off again. She was a little bit dumbfounded. Perfumer, you are so bluffing. Although we are not perfumers, we are all professionals, quasi-perfumers. Wrong's uncle is an internationally renowned perfumer. She said there's nothing special about you, so don't kid yourself. We'll go Cinque later, so you can come with us and wake up. Those people obviously didn't believe it and waved their hands disapprovingly, not even interested in listening anymore. The girl was very angry and refused to admit defeat. If you don't know the goods, you don't know the goods. There are always people who know the goods. But if you don't know the goods yourself, don't say that other people's goods are bad. Don't you think this is bad? I will sell it right away. Show it to you. After speaking, he proudly returned to Suyun with his chin raised, looking down at her. Didn't you say you wanted to buy it? How much would you pay? Suyun leaned back in her seat, raised her eyes and looked at her, a little funny. How much do you want? She lowered her head and looked at the box in her hand. There were only 2 grasses in it. She bit her lower lip. I have about 2 acres of land. Do you want them all? Ha ha ha. Before Suyun could speak, her friends who were staring over there laughed out loud. 2 acres of land. Mu Xiao Xiao, did you look for 2 acres of grass? You can't trick people like this. You should are everyone else fools. Xiao Xiao, one of the pretty girls, came over, put one hand on Mu Xiao Xiao's shoulder, and picked up the grass from the box with the other hand, and teased the tip of her nose with the grass. We also have good intentions, this is really common, and we can understand your desire to win, but I want them all. Suyun interrupted her and said. Seeing that the girl's eyes were red, she understood what it felt like to be surrounded by others and laughed at, not to mention, she wanted to buy it in the first place. I just didn't expect there to be so many. When I heard 2 acres of land, I was slightly shocked. However, it's not a problem to buy them all. Her words shocked everyone, not only Mu Xiao Xiao, but also the girl and some other people. Their laughter stopped abruptly and they all looked at her as if they were looking at a monster. The air was stagnant for a few seconds. The girl standing next to Mu Xiaoxiao came to her senses first, showed a mocking smile, put down the hand on her shoulder, loosened of the other hand, and the grass fell back. In the box. This lady has really good vision, I wish you fortune. These words were said to Suyun, but they were not really blessings, they were full of teasing, as if they were waiting for a good show. In the box inside, 3 people saw all this with their eyes. One of them was particularly surprised. Why is she here? End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 297. Chapter 297. Let's compare first and then talk about it. There was a reason for his surprise, because Suyun should still be in the courtyard at this moment. The only gate was locked, and the surrounding walls were nearly 5 meters high. Did she fly out? Here, Suyun's attention was all on the spices, and naturally she didn't notice that anyone else was also paying attention. If you don't believe it, this is the deposit. He took out his wallet seriously, pulled out a small stack and stuffed it into the girl's hand. You can write me the address and I'll come and take a look at it another day. Sign a formal contract. Seeing that she was serious and not joking at all, those people all looked surprised and couldn't hide their ridicule. Congratulations, Mu Xiaoxiao, there really is someone with a smart eye who knows what you are doing. Patting Mu Xiaoxiao on the shoulder, the girl who said congratulations before had a mocking tone. Suyun actually doesn't care. If most people knew how to recognize the goods, perfumers wouldn't be so scarce. If spices could be recognized by ordinary people, they wouldn't be so rare and precious. Anyway, today's trip was quite fruitful. She carefully put the box away and turned around to leave, but she didn't expect to be stopped by Mu Xiaoxiao. Wait a minute, she stood in front of Suyun. Tell them, is this a very rare spice? It's because they don't know the goods, right? You are young and energetic, but you will not admit defeat after all. Looking around, she found that everyone's eyes were on her. She became the focus of attention for a while. This feeling was really bad. With a slight cough, Suyun said, it depends on the person. I think it's very good, and I'm willing to buy it all. You also think it's very good, so why care about what others think? How can that work? Mu Xiaoxiao was very stubborn. The final product of spices is for people to appreciate. They don't understand appreciation, but you do. Aren't you a perfumer? Tell them how much they are ridiculous. I don't understand at all. Suyun was helpless. She just wants to buy these spices, and does not want to be a teacher to teach and educate people. Teaching and other things should be left to the professional level. Well, little girl, everyone has different preferences. You can't ask everyone to be the same. Just like some people like the sweetness of Osman, thus, some people like the freshness of citrus, and some people like the coolness of mint. There is no difference. You like it, so do I. If you like it, if you want to sell it and I want to buy it, that's fine. She felt that this was a very simple matter in itself, so why make it so complicated? But she thought so, and others might not think so, especially this stubborn little girl, who actually put the money directly back into her hand, and then snatched the box back. If you say so, then I won't sell it. Suyun. Hello. How could this be? What about integrity when doing business? Okay, I finally understand, Mu Xiaoxiao, this is what you asked for. You're very hardworking. You even invited me for this competition, but your acting skills are really not that good, and I won't cooperate with you. Mu Xiaoxiao frowned. You guys are talking nonsense. I'm not looking for excuses. Neither is she. Isn't she? One of the boys sneered and looked Suyun up and down. You said you are a perfumer, right? Then do you dare to compete? In Suyun's eyes, these boys and girls, who are only 18 or 19 years old, are just children, and there is nothing serious about them. I want to buy something, not compete. She was too lazy to waste time here and focused her attention on the main character. Little girl, you just promised to sell it to me. In business, you must be honest and don't go back on your word. Ah. I just regret it and won't sell it. She looked around. Unless you can prove to them that you are not the person I hired, but you are really a perfumer. If you make them admit defeat, I will sell it to them. You. What a inexplicable little girl. It's not very old, so I am really strong. What does it mean to win or lose in this kind of thing? Boring. She didn't speak, and the others thought she was scared and started laughing. You still say it's not a request, so you don't dare. Compared to what? Soo-yoon suddenly spoke, so that they didn't react for a moment, and they were all stunned for a moment. Bishik Siang, the one who spoke, was the girl who had made fun of Mu Xiao before. She was not tall, but she looked very powerful, and the others obviously listened to her. Comparing with you, Soo-yoon didn't expect that her casual question would make these people burst into laughter. Compare with her, do you know who she is, and you just compare with her, your tone is really not small. Mu Xiao, if you find someone to help you and you don't put in a good deal in advance, who should she compete with? She wants to compete with Rong for her fragrance. You are asking for your own death. Who doesn't know that our Rong is the little princess of Shixiang? It was inherited from her uncle. Do you know who her uncle is? She. Okay, probably because he had been complimented enough. He waved his hand and the girl named Rong said, compare with me. I'm afraid you will say that I bully you, so you can compare with him. He pointed at a boy casually, the one who spoke just now. What's the comparison? Like everyone else, Soo-yoon actually didn't want to bully a group of children, but she was really reluctant to part with this batch of spices. If she went back and made good use of it, the effect of the finished product would be very satisfactory. Forget it, just think of it as a warm-up, since it's just idle time anyway. Each of us wears perfume. The time limit is 30 minutes. Whoever of you is the first to write down the smell and properties of perfume on everyone. The one with the highest accuracy will win. If the accuracy is the same, the one with the shortest time will win. After pondering, she told the rules. Before Soo-yoon could speak, Mu Xiao protested, no. He must know the perfume you are wearing. This is unfair. It doesn't matter. At first I wanted to say it doesn't matter, this is simply child's play for Soo-yoon, okay. But obviously there was no room for her to speak. That Rong said again, he doesn't know. But to be fair, each of us will spray 3 different perfumes on our bodies. Now when we go to spray them on temporarily, Xiao doesn't know about us either. What's used? Is that fair enough? 3 kinds, the boy couldn't help shouting, but Rong glared at her hard and shut her mouth again. How is it? This question was asked to Soo-yoon. No problem, but she turned to look at Mu Xiao, if I win, you can't go back on your word. I want all the ingredients. Okay, but if you win, you have to convince them that I won this fight. Ha, do you really think she will win? The people on the side laughed and said, let's compete first and then talk. End of this chapter. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 298. Chapter 298. There is a feeling of frustration. In fact, Soo-yoon knew very well that this kind of competition was relatively difficult for people like them who were new to perfumery, but for her, it was simply child's play. However, you can't blame her for bullying the children. She didn't want to play such a childish game, but she really wanted the spices in the little girl's hands. The result of the game is not controversial at all, it is almost an overwhelming instant kill. After she won, the faces of those people didn't look very good. They were completely shocked. They didn't expect that she would win and win so easily. Of course, this was not the point for Suyun. She took the spice box back confidently and said, "Remember what you promised me, I will come to pick up the goods in 2 days." The little girl was completely shocked. Although she felt that Suyun was very knowledgeable and could appreciate her spices, she did not expect that she could win so easily. Even she might not be able to win a competition of this level. Now she was really convinced. "Wait a minute," before Mu Xiaoxiao could recover, the girl named Rong Rong spoke up. She was obviously the leader of these people. As soon as she spoke, someone immediately blocked Suyun's way. "Why, go back on your word," Suyun turned around and looked at them and said. "She is not afraid that they will regret it? If the other party comes in a well-behaved manner, then there will be a way to follow the rules. If they want to be aggressive, she will completely accompany them to the end." "That's not the case." Rong waved her hand and walked up to her, looking up at her. "This is the first time tonight that I have looked at her seriously. She is unfamiliar and I have never seen her before." She knew all the well-known perfumers in the circle, and they were more or less familiar to her, but she obviously had no impression of the one in front of her. "Are you not from the imperial capital?" she asked. Suyun laughed. "Why, are you treated differently if you are from the imperial capital or not?" "I didn't say that." "But..." Rong paused and said, "It's nothing if you compete with him. Do you have the guts to compete with me?" Wrong. Someone nearby couldn't help but stop her. "Your grandma won't let you." "Hush," he gestured to be silent, and at the same time glanced sideways, and the man did not dare to say anything. Being stared at by her, Suyun smiled disapprovingly. "Why should I compare with you?" "Why, you don't dare anymore," she sneered and said, "I thought you were so brave and capable." "What, are you afraid?" "If you say yes, then yes, it's really not interesting to compete with such a little girl. She is more interested in how to best use the newly acquired fresh spices. Instead of fighting with a little girl here for no reason, it is better to rush back and study new things." "Stop." Unexpectedly, his provocation method didn't work. Rong changed her expression and shouted, not wanting her to leave so easily. It doesn't matter if his subordinates lose the game, the main thing is that they lose face. The reason why she proposed a competition was not only to win back face, but also to gain confidence in herself. She feels that she is talented when it comes to perfume making. In addition, she has learned a lot from her uncle from time to time. She has never lost every time she competes with her peers. Rong feels that she is the top perfumer in the future and will become the leader in this industry. She has never failed. It is rare for her to encounter a decent opponent, so how can she let it go so easily? "I thought you at least knew the words willing to admit defeat." Suyun took a step back. She was a little impatient and struggled with these people. "You won't know until you are convinced or not. Do you think you are very powerful?" Looking at her provocatively, Rong was no longer willing to let her go today. She took 2 steps forward and approached Suyun. Her eyes were full of fighting power, as if she was determined to never give up. "As the sword was at war, I heard a voice, Rong." It was a very ordinary call. However, the girl whose name was called was obviously shocked. Her eyes were startled, and then a flash of panic flashed. She turned around and called out rather unnaturally, "Uncle! What are you doing here?" The man came over. Although he was wearing casual clothes, he couldn't hide his nobility. He asked casually, and Rong was no longer as comfortable as before when she spoke, "Hey, I'm having fun with my friends." "Is the fight over?" he asked again. "Do, the fight is over," she replied in a low voice. She didn't expect that her uncle would be here. She had no idea when he came. "Take 2 steps forward," the man raised his hand and touched the top of her head. "Now that it's over, go home quickly, it's getting late." "You, a little girl, are wandering around outside in the middle of the night. Although he said this to He Rong, the man was looking at Suyun. For some reason, Suyun felt that this person looked a little familiar, but she couldn't remember where she had seen him before. But I still. Before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by the man. Do you want me to tell your grandma? One sentence made her wilt, and she muttered in a low voice, okay, I'll just go home. She had already said this, and the others spontaneously dispersed. However, when passing by Suyun, He Rong was still unconvinced. I will definitely compete with you, and I will definitely beat you. Shrugged his shoulders as an answer. Little brat, you are really good at it. Seeing that everyone who had troubled her was gone, Suyun was about to leave, but someone grabbed her arm and said, you're just leaving like that. Looking down at the hand holding her arm, she looked up again and saw the man just now. What else? I helped you out, shouldn't you also thank me? The man said confidently. First, the girl just now is your niece. You stopped her for her own good. Second, I didn't feel trapped just now, nor did I feel that you helped me out. Finally, the most important point is, I don't seem to have asked you to help me out. She was speechless after what she said, and the man laughed. You are still so eloquent. Suyun frowned and looked at him seriously. Suyun thought his words were a bit strange. Do we know each other? The meaning behind her words sounded as if she had known her before. The man was stunned for a moment. He probably didn't expect that she would ask such a question. He was even more surprised than she was. Don't you remember me? It's not that he is overconfident. At this age, there is no woman who would not remember him after dealing with him. However, what is seen in her eyes is confusion. It is obvious that she is not pretending. She really does not remember. Inexplicably, there is a feeling of frustration. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 299. Chapter 299. Even if you think about it with your toes, you will know there is something wrong. We met before in France, he tried to remind her, but Suyun still didn't think of him. I was sure that she was not pretending, and finally gave up the idea of reminding her again, and said directly, during the tasting competition, you were slightly better than me. My name is Jin. Hum marked the distance with his fingers to show that he was not much worse than her, and then he extended his hand to express friendship. Looking at his hand, Suyun nodded slightly as a greeting. I know. New. What answer is this? Is this woman so arrogant? I tried my skills in France before, but unexpectedly I got an unexpected reward. I wonder when I will have the opportunity to formally compete again. Suyun glanced at the man in front of her. Although his words were polite, there was obvious dissatisfaction in his words. The implication was that he was careless last time and did not try his best, so he lost to her. So I want to try to defeat her again. Then, let's talk about it when we have a chance. She smiled lightly and said lightly, holding the box and walking out of the store. Watching her leave, the person next to Jin couldn't help but said, Master, are you just going to let her go like this? Since she can come out, there is nothing that can stop her from leaving. Aren't you curious about how she came out? How do the people under your command do things? The corner of his eye squinted, and the person next to him suddenly shuddered. I'm sorry, young master, I'll go check it out right away. He raised a hand to stop her and said, don't alert the snake yet. Since she can come out today, it won't be just once. What did they grab here just now? What do you mean? He glanced hesitantly, then understood instantly. I understand, I'll do it right away. They all saw what happened just now and listened to what they said. It doesn't matter what kind of spices that little girl sells. What's important is that Soo-yoon likes and wants it very much. She also agreed to pick it up the next day. Since she made an appointment, she will always come out of the yard and arrive. It's okay to just sit back and wait for the rabbit. Hee-jin didn't say anything, leaving him to do his work, with a smile on his lips. His words just now were not entirely polite. The French trip was indeed very fruitful. This little woman really aroused his interest. Soo-yoon took a taxi and returned to the yard. When she came out, she had already gotten an overview of the situation nearby. This is probably a private courtyard. All the buildings are built according to personal designs. Although there are many courtyards around, most of them are ordinary houses. There is no one like this one with so many things installed. Besides, any ordinary private house would have a 5-meter-high wall built in the yard. It would not be an exaggeration to say it is a small prison. Directly opposite the courtyard gate, Soo-yoon carried a backpack with her tonight's harvest in it. She was about to walk forward when she suddenly felt an unusual movement beside her. She immediately raised her elbow and bumped into it. A spin. The next second, she was held in his arms, with a familiar smell and an even more familiar voice, "It's me." Opening her eyes wide, Soo-yoon looked at the face in front of her in surprise. "Why are you here? It seems that I'm not too late." Although I knew it would be no problem to protect herself with her skills, I only breathed a sigh of relief after seeing her safe with my own eyes. Having learned from the French kidnapping case, he was indeed a bit cautious, but it is always right to be cautious. "Is there a problem?" I blinked and understood the meaning of his words. "Let's talk somewhere else," Yao said, pulling her to a big tree not far away. There was a black Mercedes-Benz parked there. Under the double cover of the night and the shade of the tree, it was hard to notice the truth. "Did not see it." She felt much warmer immediately after sitting in the car. She rubbed her hands, and the next second, he held a pair of hands in his palms. "It's so late, where have you been?" He warmed her with the warmth of his palms, and couldn't help but blame her in his words. "I went treasure hunting thinking of the treasure I found." I couldn't help but smile, my eyebrows curved, and joy overflowed from the bottom of my heart. "You can still laugh," he said this, but looking at her happy look, he couldn't bear to say anything else. He is also responsible for this matter. It was because he didn't think it through well. He didn't expect that someone would be bold enough to pretend to be a perfume association. The invitations were sent to the company. He was so carefree that he was not afraid of being found out to be a fake. Soo-yoon looked at him, and could only see a hazy silhouette in the light of the street lamp. However, this added a bit of mystery and made his whole person's aura more obvious. She spoke words of blame, there was so much concern in his movements and tone, how could she not hear it? "I got a good thing today and saw you again. It's a good day. It's all a happy thing. Why can't I laugh?" She thought about it and felt that she was indeed lucky today. "If it hadn't been turned out from the inside, would you have been happy?" He shook his head, not knowing whether to applaud her optimism or scold her for being big-hearted. "Hey, how did you know that I translated it?" She was surprised. Could it be that he saw her when she turned it out? Impossible, she observed carefully, no one saw her around the house, and her movements were very light. And if he noticed it at that time, why didn't he show up until now? The security lock used in this yard is the latest password plus fingerprint lock. It is difficult for you to crack it alone. There is no other way. It shouldn't be too difficult for you to find out, and it is the simplest and most effective. The result speaks for itself. She was indeed successful. She sat here calmly and discussed with him how to know. "It's 5 meters high, so it's not that difficult. You think too highly of me." He said it in an exaggerated way, although what he said was indeed correct. But such an ordinary tone made what she did seem too ordinary. "In fact, I did a small test. Fortunately, there are trees in the yard and the wall is not too smooth." After trying it a few times, I relied on my own skills and climbed up a few times. Sci fondly scratched the bridge of her nose. It's very difficult for others, but if it's hard to live with you, even if I don't care, have you passed your grandpa's test? It is true that this matter may be a bit difficult for ordinary people, but for the people of the Chu family, it is not too difficult. Without mentioning this, she asked with interest, "You came all the way here. Is there something wrong with the invitation this time?" Originally, he had no plans for a trip to the imperial capital. He had agreed that she would come back after attending the event. He rushed here in such a hurry, and pulled her into the car to talk to her mysteriously. In addition, today, in this courtyard, a series of things happened. When things are put together, you can tell there is a problem by just thinking about it with your toes. End of this chapter. Si Shao's sweet wife, she is doted on. Author, Jin Yet. Chapter 300. Chapter 300. If you are playing with fire, play with fire. The invitation is fake. Fake, Su-Yun was surprised. She had thought that there might be something wrong with the invitation this time, or that the other party had other intentions, but she never thought that even the invitation letter was fake. How could it be fake? I've seen it has the seal of the Fragrance Industry Association on it, so it doesn't look like it's fake. If someone really deliberately fakes it, they can call the police. Si Yao nodded, but it shouldn't be that simple. I've studied the seal, and it's indeed not fake. It can only be said that someone used the association seal fraudulently. But how could the association seal be obtained so easily? And, do you know who owns the courtyard you live in now? Whose? How did she know who owned this yard? Have you heard of the He family in the imperial capital? Not sure how much she knew, Si Yao slowly explained. He Jin, the youngest son of the He family, this courtyard is in his name. He Jin. If she only thought the name was somewhat familiar before, then she had just met him, so it was impossible for her to forget it so quickly. Do you know her? Seeing that her reaction was a little extreme, Si Yao asked strangely. He was there when I participated in the tasting competition in France and... After a pause, she was recalling the scene in her mind. No wonder he looked at her so strangely. It turned out that this yard belonged to him. Could it be that he had done all this? Si Yao frowned, and what? After thinking about it, she decided to tell the truth, and I just saw him in a small shop. Did he say anything to you? Hearing her saying that she had met He Jin just now, Si Yao suddenly asked nervously. Su-Yun shook her head. Maybe he was a little unconvinced by his loss to me last time and said that he would have a chance to compete again. I didn't think much about it at the time. Now it seems that he has arranged all this, so what's the purpose? After pondering for a while, Si Yao thought seriously. He Jin is a proud and arrogant person, and he has been pampered since he was a child. He is indeed involved in the field of perfumery. I didn't expect that you have already had a relationship with him. Such an intersection. Seeing that his expression was solemn and not as casual as before, Su-Yun knew that this He Jin was not an easy character to dismiss. But even if I haven't had much dealings with him before, I have heard of the reputation of the imperial capital He family. The He family is involved in politics, and the previous generations were still in the military. Although they have retired a little in recent years, there are still people in the family who are engaged in politics. Originally, the whole family followed this path, but there were some disobedient juniors who insisted on doing so. Be in business. Although his influence in the business world is not very great, and his industry does not seem to be that rich, his status is still very important because of his family background. Does he just want to compete with me? If so, it's not difficult. I can just compete with him. If his purpose is really that simple, it would be easy. Just being afraid is not just that. Si Yao really shook his head and said, he went to great lengths to get you here, and it's definitely not just for a competition. If it was Jin who did it, it would make sense. With his status and the fact that he is also a director of the Fragrance Industry Association, it would be easy to get the seal. It's just that the so-called invitation did not get the approval of the industry association and was just his own private behavior. It's no wonder he didn't notice it at the time. Then, let's see what he wants to do. Soo-yoon shrugged, not looking panicked at all. Aren't you afraid? Staring into her eyes, her face was filled with hazy beauty in the night, making him reluctant to let go and not wanting her to enter that yard again. What are you afraid of? Soo-yoon said disapprovingly, and laughed. As you said, he went to great lengths to get me here, not just for a competition, and definitely not just to kill me. Since that's the case, I have nothing to fear, I just wait for him to take action. It's just that the other party will make a move, and she will respond to it. Are you afraid? What's the use of being afraid? With an almost inaudible sigh, Sci-Yao slightly loosened his grip on her hand. Sometimes I feel that you are a little too strong. You are wrong, I am not strong at all. I am strong because you are behind me. Soo-yoon smiled and poked his chest with her finger. You are already here, what else can I do? Scared. If she was still a little anxious in her heart before, the moment she saw him, her heart was completely calm. He is here. He came as soon as he realized that she might be in danger. What else does she have to be afraid of? With him here, she has nothing to fear. Hold her restless little hand, Sci-Yao said in a low voice. Do you know that men are not allowed to poke around here? You are playing with fire. If you're playing with fire, play with fire. How can you? Well. Before he finished speaking, his lips were already sealed by him. Sci-Yao pressed her lips closely, searching hard for her sweetness and fragrance. He missed her so much. Although they hadn't seen each other for just 2 days, it felt like 2 months or 2 years. If he hadn't been too worried about her current situation and safety, he would have hesitated the moment he saw her. Not her. The touching of lips aroused each other's flames, and the long kiss ended with rapid breathing, leaving some unfinished thoughts. Then I'll go back first. Glancing in the direction of the courtyard, Soo-yoon's breath was still a little short, and if it continued, it would be almost done. He held her wrist to prevent her from leaving, and held her waist with one hand. He buried his head in her neck, breathing heavily. If I didn't want you to conserve your strength, I really want to do it here. Upon hearing his words, Soo-yoon's face immediately turned red. Even though we have had many close contacts, it is still quite exciting to say such words at this time, in this place, and in such a situation and atmosphere. Stop it, she pushed him gently, her voice trembling a little. I have to go back, I think he will show up to find me today. He didn't show up yesterday, and he had already discovered that she had slipped out in the evening, so he knew that the yard could not contain her. If he had a purpose, how could he not show up? Hearing that his little one was shy, he raised his head and helped her straighten her collar with both hands. Be careful, you can measure it yourself. The signal jammer here has already made me want to. The method is broken. If anything happens, call me. Yes, Soo-yoon didn't expect that he didn't come for long, but he did a lot of things. She nodded. Then I'm really leaving. Having said this, people are still reluctant to leave. End of this chapter.